They were empty nesters, still going strong after nearly a half-century together.
My father and Hope were married about 42 years.
They were well thought of in the community.
Through sickness and health, the couple held true to their vows.
Bob Schreiner had been ailing, had been having a lot of health problems.
Hope had been caring for her husband for a long time. They had a very long and successful marriage.
Services personnel were concerned that it was a gunshot.
An awful bloody mess, blood everywhere.
Investigators race for answers as fear spreads through the community.
People were on edge, nervous about a killer running around on the loose.
He didn't care for being challenged. There had been quite a few arguments.
A letter saying something about a dispute potentially between somebody who was supposed to be violent.
A person can reach their limits and snap.
A hot summer day in the sleepy rural community of Townsend, Vermont.
Townsend is a mix of a lot of people who've grown up here and have family roots that go way back. Also, a lot of people that have moved here over the last 30 or 40 years for the Green Mountain State lifestyle.
Townsend itself, it was a very peaceful, quiet, well-off little town.
But Townsend's tranquility is shattered on the afternoon of June 2nd, 2004, when emergency dispatchers receive a frantic call from 71-year-old Hope Schreiner.
She sounded out of breath. She'd just gotten home and found her husband, Bob, lying on the ground like he had fallen out of the car. He was unresponsive, had a head injury. There was quite a bit of blood.
They asked her if she knew CPR, and she said no.
The emergency dispatcher went through the motions on going through CPR, how to do it, and what to look for, any vital signs. She remained doing CPR until the paramedics arrived and took over for her.
First responders make an attempt to save 78-year-old Bob Schreiner's life, but unfortunately, it's too late.
Mr. Schreiner had extensive head wounds. There was quite a bit of blood right around the immediate area, and it was apparent that he was deceased.
Paramedics quickly determine that Hope is in shock.
She was confused and disoriented, and blood had gotten all over her because she had leaned over him and he was bloody.
Emergency services personnel tended to her, took her vitals, and provided her with some oxygen.
She was taken into her house and remained there.
What paramedics have seen so far tells them Bob's death was no accident.
There was blood spatter all over the area.
The amount of blood, the amount of damage that was done to his head, it was very apparent that it wasn't just a fall that did all that.
Because there was a significant amount of blood and wounds on his head area. The emergency services personnel were concerned that it was a gunshot that had caused his death. They took protective measures because they were concerned that they might be in danger.
With clear signs of foul play, police are called to the scene.
Once it was determined that the death was suspicious, there was a significant police response.
Bob Schreiner was born in Mount Vernon, New York in 1925.
My dad was kind of a quiet person like myself, and his father was like that also. When he was younger, he was an avid outdoorsman. He loved to go fishing and hunting. My dad was in World War II in the Army Air Corps, and he was a bombardier, which is who looks through the sight to locate the target and decides when to release the bomb, when it's going to hit the target. My father never did talk about his military service. I think that's common for a lot of veterans.
The GI Bill sent Bob to Syracuse University.
My father studied forestry and landscape architecture at Syracuse and decided to go into the landscape side of it rather than just pure forestry. My mom and dad met in college. They were married a few years after college. I believe the year was 1951. They had me within a year. After that, he started his own business doing landscape architecture. I believe mostly designing plantings for different buildings.
For 9 years, Bob's successful landscaping business supported his family.
He was a well-respected landscape architect, and they had a nice life.
But Bob's perfect family life wasn't meant to last.
My mother left my father a few years after my youngest brother was born. My mother just, I guess, wanted a different relationship, so she met someone else.
Bob wasn't lonely for long. 29-year-old Hope Treppas and Bob Schreiner had a lot in common.
Hope and Bob had nice, clean, middle-class lives before they met and fell in love.
My mother and Hope were den mothers when I was in Cub Scouts. My mother said that she introduced her to my father just as a friend, not anything else, but I guess that started the possibility of a relationship.
She was well-spoken. They each had children from prior relationships.
Hope had divorced her first husband. This is probably around 1960.
It wasn't long before Hope and Bob tied the knot.
My father seemed to be happy with Hope. He adopted Hope's 5 children. Hope and my father had Scott in 1962, the only child they had together. He's about 10 years younger than me.
They had a blended family of 9 children, one of which was their own. They had a very long and successful marriage.
But their marriage wasn't without hardships.
My father had a bad car accident and hurt his leg really bad, and he was not able to walk very well. He had a very bad limp. It was hard for him to go up and down stairs.
As Hope helped Bob cope with his new physical challenges, the couple was dealt another terrible blow.
Hope had 5 children, one of whom died as a teenager in a car crash. Hope was pretty devastated by the loss of her daughter.
Throughout these tragedies, Hope and Bob's happy marriage endured. Bob retired in 1993, and with the children grown and out of the home, Bob and Hope moved from their empty nest in Long Island to the village of Townsend, Vermont. Bob showed no...
At their current home,
They lived in a very idyllic setting. He had a small orchard, and it had a fish pond on it and a large garden. My father really did like the kind of rural, rustic area because he could have his big gardens and do a lot of landscaping.
Bob and Hope were well thought of in their community.
He did some volunteer work at a local hospital, Grace Hospital. They had an active social life. Hope had a lot of activities and knew a lot of the neighbors around there.
Life in Vermont was perfect. Until Bob's health took a turn.
Bob Schreiner had been ailing, had been having a lot of health problems.
My father was a lifelong smoker, and he had gotten lung cancer and had a lung removed. He was fairly ill, especially in the wintertime. I believe he'd had lung difficulties. I don't know if it was pneumonia or the flu or just the general effects of having lost a lung from lung cancer. He just couldn't get around much and needed a lot of care.
Throughout his long battle with cancer, Hope was Bob's rock.
He was recovering. The cancer had not recurred, and so he was starting to recover from that.
By 2004, with Hope's help, 78-year-old Bob was on the mend. For the first time since Bob was diagnosed, the Shriners began to think about the future again. But on June 2nd, 2004, the couple's future plans are halted when Bob's life comes to a sudden and brutal end.
Bob had a substantial
I
amount.
didn't know what we had. I was told by one of the uniform troopers that it looked like it might be a gunshot wound around the scene for any evidence that might lead to where the shooter could have been. Word got out that there was a murder in Townsend, Vermont.
Everyone was just sort of shocked because Townsend was just a sleepy little bedroom community.
Coming up, police race to uncover the truth as fear spreads through the community.
It could have been a robbery gone bad. Speculation ran wild.
And investigators unmask a motive right next door.
There had been quite a few arguments.
Dr. Hope Schreiner reported finding her husband unresponsive gives investigators an indication of the severity of the attack.
He was an awful bloody mess with a cracked skull. and blood everywhere.
The left ear was severely lacerated to the point where it was almost coming off. There were small holes in the back of his skull.
The examination of Bob's wounds also rules out the first responders' initial theory.
The regional medical examiner, as he finished his preliminary examination of Mr. Schreiner at the scene, he was able to determine that it was not a gunshot wound. It was blunt force trauma.
The window of death was from like 8:30 in the morning until 12:30 or 1:30 in the afternoon.
Folks in town had been concerned that this was somebody who'd broken into their house trying to get something to sell, or somebody passing through. It could have been a robbery gone bad. It could have been a drifter of some kind. Speculation ran wild.
But what investigators observe at the scene suggests robbery was not the motive.
Bob's wallet was on his person, and we found that there was some money in it. It was a very nice house. There were things that could have been taken. None of that occurred. So we ruled out robbery.
Detective Robert McCarthy hopes he can learn more from Bob's widow.
The detective lieutenant gave us all our assignments. Mine was to go in and talk with Hope Schreiner. Rescue personnel had taken care of Hope, but she was all set, so they left pretty much upon my arrival.
Detective McCarthy starts by asking Hope when she last saw her husband alive.
Hope Schreiner said that they did have a cup of coffee in the morning, and she left at about 8:30 that morning to go play tennis. She told me that her husband was headed to a local hospital for an eye exam, and that he was by his car when she left.
Hope says she returned around 12:30.
Ms. Schreiner basically said that she went to play tennis that morning, stopped off to do a few errands, and stopped off at the bank before coming home.
When she returned back to the house, she saw Bob Schreiner's car was still there, which she said was a surprise to her, but she didn't think anything of it at the time.
She parked in a different place with her car than where his car was.
She told me that she had gone upstairs to see if he was on his computer. She came back down.
She did not notice anything being wrong right away. She took the dogs out and went for a walk.
More than an hour passed before Hope came back to the house.
It was when she returned from taking the dogs for the walk that she said she found his body in the driveway and called the police.
The call came in to 911 at about 1:41 p.m.
Detective McCarthy asks Hope about her relationship with Bob.
I asked about her husband's demeanor.
His medical problems had become a burden on their relationship.
Hope did actually admit that she was frustrated having to take care of him because he was more and more dependent on her.
She openly admitted she had her issues with Bob. She was pretty upfront about it.
Any couple that's been together for 40 years is going to have their strains and problems, and one of them has health problems, and the other never signed up to be a nurse. You can easily see how this builds up.
Taking care of her husband during his illness had been tough. But according to Hope, Bob's recovery over the last few weeks had put them back on track.
Bob had been doing better in the weeks before his death.
When it comes to enemies, Hope says she doesn't know of any. But there was an incident a few weeks before the murder that raises suspicion for investigators.
A neighbor had been annoyed by the dogs for quite some time and had complained to the Shriners. Bob's temperament was such that he didn't care for being challenged about anything. So it's my understanding that there had been quite a few arguments.
Could these arguments have led to a violent encounter?
There's always a chance that people act outside their normal course of conduct. It seemed like he was a possible suspect.
When there's a lot of rage focused at somebody, it usually is a person that they know. One of the other detectives canvassed the neighborhood and subsequently talked with him.
The neighbor admits to having arguments over the Shriners' dogs in the past.
The Shriners and this gentleman did not get along.
The neighbor had a problem with Hope walking her dogs, and what she would do is she would let them run off leash and then call for them time after time, fairly loud. And the neighbor really didn't care for that too much.
When asked his whereabouts over the last few days, the neighbor reveals that he'd spent the night before Bob's murder doing a sleep study.
Being tired, coming from a sleep test, and dealing with a man who was known to be, shall we say, touchy, it could have evolved into a terrible fight.
The neighbor insists he had nothing to do with Bob's murder. He can't yet be ruled out, but investigators must broaden their search.
We just did not know what we had, and we can't focus on any one thing until you get more definitive information.
It's going to take time for crime scene investigators to process the forensic evidence at the Shriner home.
When we told her that we were going to close the house down and she'd have to leave, we told her that she would probably be gone for a couple of days while we obtained a warrant to be able to look for microscopic evidence. She said she wanted to make sure that the cats and the dog were fed. So she went downstairs with another detective and she filled up some bowls for the animals.
After the animals are cared for, investigators escort Hope from the residence.
Her home was subsequently sealed. We had troopers placed on guard overnight until we were able to obtain the warrant to go in and look for things like any DNA, any fingerprints, any bloodstains, things like that.
As night falls, news of Bob's tragic passing starts to make its way to family members.
My brother called to inform me that my father had passed. That was quite a shock to find out that he'd been killed and not just died of a heart attack or some natural cause. Who would want to kill an elderly man, especially at his home? I didn't really have any idea about it. I just was in shock that he was dead and that it was a murder.
The next morning, forensic investigators return to the crime scene with a search warrant for the house.
Crime scene search team personnel were dispatched and the house was searched.
While investigators search the house, the autopsy on Bob Shriner comes back and sheds light on his injuries.
The person who killed Mr. Shriner hit him near the ear and the back of the head a whole series of times. He would have been almost immediately incapacitated by the blows.
No murder weapon has been found yet, but the autopsy tells investigators exactly what to look for.
A hard metal rake-like instrument had impacted Mr. Shriner's skull probably at least 7 times.
There were a lot of garden tools right by the area he was killed in.
Unfortunately, none of the tools collected from the crime scene match the pattern in the victim's skull. But when they speak to Bob's family members, detectives learn that one of Bob's rakes appears to be missing.
There had been a rake, according to the gardener, at the property. The gardener indicated that the rake was used sometimes as a cane and also to weed and aerate the soil.
He had a lifetime of problem with his leg because he had injured it a long time ago in the car accident. He had a rake near the car to use as a walking stick to walk between the house and the car and around his yard. That would make sense to me, that it would be there.
The rake sometimes was stored in the bushes near the car, and the rake was gone.
Did Bob Shriner's killer beat him to death with his own rake and dispose of it after? With a possible weapon now identified, the lingering question remains, who would want Bob dead?
Didn't know my dad to have any enemies. He was a very nice person, and he always seemed to be well-liked in the community.
Then detectives get a surprise break in the case.
We got a call. I was at the office. She said that she had some information to pass along regarding the homicide.
Coming up, a deadly secret jolts the case.
She really didn't know Ms. Shriner very well. Not well enough to say something like that.
and police take a look inside a marriage on life support.
They had a 2-month fling.
One day after 78-year-old Bob Schreiner was bludgeoned to death outside his home, police are working hard to find his killer. As a forensic team continues searching the home Bob shared with his wife, Hope Schreiner, detectives receive a call that provides the first real break in the case.
There was a co-worker of Hope's. They both worked at a local library on a voluntary basis. And Hope said to this co-worker words to the effect of, she wanted to be rid of her husband.
When Hope's coworker comes into the station for an interview,
She wanted a break from him. She wanted him to go to a VA hospital, but he wasn't sick enough to go to a VA hospital. The coworker was taken aback because she really didn't know Ms. Schreiner very well. Not well enough to say something like that.
She asked jokingly if Hope was going to poison him.
Hope just kind of looked at her strangely and just said no.
Hope's coworker dropped the subject, but Hope didn't.
Hope later told this coworker that she was looking for insurance money. And Hope said to this coworker words to the effect of, even my husband Bob has said that to me. All you're waiting for, Hope, is my life insurance.
According to Hope, Bob was anything but the perfect husband others may have perceived.
She was unhappy with her husband. He was mean. He yelled at her a lot. He demanded a lot of her.
They were not very kind to one another. They had lost the ability to be patient with each other, and they were snippy with each other.
Hope had told her that she was getting tired, that she had been thinking about moving on.
And Hope told the coworker that she'd sought happiness elsewhere.
Hope Schreiner told her coworker that she had just begun a relationship with a gentleman up the road. She would go to his house on occasion after Bob had gone to bed. She also conveyed that this relationship turned romantic in nature, and she was happy to be with this person who was a widower.
Hope's coworker doesn't know the name of Hope's lover, but whoever he is, he's now a potential suspect in Bob's murder. Investigators contact family members for more information about Hope and Bob's relationship.
Hope's daughter said that they were fairly close, but because of the distance, California to Vermont, they didn't see each other very often.
She tells investigators that Hope and Bob's marital problems were an open secret in the family.
Most of the family knew that their relationship was strained. They all said something about bickering between them and that it was hard because Bob had all these physical ailments and he was a person used to working and being on the go.
Hope's daughter says that Hope admitted she had strayed from her marriage.
She seemed to have found this ray of happiness in this affair that she was having with the neighbor.
When investigators call him in for questioning, the 75-year-old widower says he was horrified to hear about Bob's murder. Investigators then push further about his rumored affair with Hope. The man reluctantly comes clean.
He had been intimate with Ms. Schreiner a number of times before Mr. Schreiner's killing in June of 2004.
He felt really bad about the relationship. He was Bob's friend. He felt bad and uncomfortable.
The man explains that when his brother died in November of 2003, Hope reached out to comfort him. Then one thing led to another.
The relationship with Hope had just started and it really was not serious. They would meet just by a happenstance at the post office or, in a local store. I think he felt bad for Bob Schreiner, knowing that he was physically limited. He could understand why Hope needed to kind of get away from the house, but he didn't want it to go too much farther.
He was actually trying to cut the relationship off with Hope.
They were not having a relationship at the time that Bob died.
The man also says he couldn't have been involved in Bob's death, and he can prove it.
the gentleman, he had been, at the time of the murder, he had been visiting his daughter in Florida. So he wasn't even in the area. So that took him out.
Detectives shift their focus to the timeline established by Hope's alibi.
Hope Schreiner told investigators that she had left that day around 8:30 and had gone to play tennis.
We checked out Hope's alibi, and she did play tennis when she was supposed to. She played once a week. Her partner did not see anything out of the ordinary with Hope.
After tennis, Hope ran errands.
She had dropped a lamp off to be repaired, and then she stopped at the bank at around 12 or 12:20 on the way back home.
The owner of the lighting store remembers Hope coming in just before lunch.
She even was able to produce receipts from when she was at the bank that were time-stamped to corroborate that part of her day.
Hope's alibi did check out for that morning.
However, investigators do find one inconsistency in Hope's story. In her initial interview, she told police that she expected Bob to be at a doctor's appointment when she got home.
Mr. Schreiner did not have an appointment at the hospital that day. He was scheduled to go the following week.
It's a small detail, but maybe an important one. After completing their search of the house, crime scene investigators present their findings to detectives.
The crime scene was gone over by our forensic lab. It was found that there's blood patterns that went from the scene into a side door down in the cellar. There were also bloodstains on the cellar stairway walls. At the base of the cellar, there was also a few drops of blood.
There was a load of freshly washed laundry, and there was blood located on some of that freshly washed laundry.
They found these blood-stained plastic bags stuffed into a dog food bag.
It appeared that someone tried to put kitty litter all over it in hopes that we wouldn't look there. And those bags contained blood that did come back to Robert Schreiner.
Based on admissions of an affair, prior comments about poisoning Bob, and blood found in and around the basement, the evidence seems to be pointing to one person, Hope Schreiner.
This wasn't about a disgruntled neighbor at all. It didn't turn out to be anything that was really a factor in this case.
Hope was the person who was the real suspect in what was going on.
When detectives circle back to the couple's friends, they begin to finally fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle.
Hope told one of her neighbors that this hadn't been what she signed up for, that she wanted something different, that she might have been contemplating a divorce.
Coming up, lab results reveal yet another wrinkle in the case.
Somebody who intended to poison him.
And a killer's words bring the truth to light.
I just snapped.
Fifth, 3 days after the murder of 78-year-old Bob Schreiner, a friend of Bob's wife, Hope, comes forward with more information for detectives. She says the Schreiner's marriage wasn't just strained, it was toxic.
A neighbor reported that they fought like cats and dogs. She wasn't a battered woman, from what I understood. It wasn't physical, it was emotional.
Hope's friend tells police that the new home they were building wasn't meant to help them live together. It was actually designed to keep them apart.
Miss Schreiner had told her friend that she was looking forward to Mr. Schreiner having his own space within that home.
And rumors had been swirling that Hope's affair with the neighbor may not have been unique.
When we asked her to leave the afternoon of the homicide, Schreiner got into the neighbor's car and had a funny look on her face, to the point where the neighbor asked, "Why?" And Hope Schreiner said to her, "I just snapped."
The woman tells detectives that wasn't all.
Hope Schreiner asked the neighbor to go down into her cellar and get an old dog food, a bag, to take it out and dump it in the trash somewhere off of the property. The neighbor said, yeah, I can't do that. After this conversation, the neighbor said, I don't want to hear anymore.
When detectives receive the final results of a blood and tissue analysis performed on samples taken during Bob's autopsy, it's a game changer.
The toxicology report showed that at the time of his death, there was evidence of a sleep aid in his system, a significant amount, along with caffeine.
The amount of sleep aid in Bob's blood was well above what anyone would intentionally take, especially if he were on the way to his car.
He had gotten up to go somewhere, and then the sleeping pills took effect.
Somebody who intended to poison him and have him overdose and just sort of fall asleep and never wake up.
The toxicology results directly tie back to a key piece of evidence uncovered during the search of the house: a pill bottle.
She did have a prescription for sleeping pills. Her recent prescription was for 30 pills. There were 7 pills missing from Hope Schreiner's prescription.
The level of sleeping pills in Mr. Schreiner's blood was consistent with having taken 7 of those pills, or being given 7 of those pills early in the morning on June 2nd.
There was no reason for that to be in his system after he just woke up at that high a volume. My impression was that she was hoping that he would die at the kitchen table after ingesting all that.
Investigators are ready to take Hope Schreiner into custody for the murder of her husband.
We were just finishing up the warrant to arrest Hope Schreiner for murder. As we were doing this, we got 2 separate calls from Hope's daughters, both saying that in talking with her, they felt that she was a harm to herself and that we really needed to get up there and possibly have her committed.
When police rush to where Hope's staying, they find her upset but unharmed.
We went up there and we found that she was alone. We told her why we were there and that the daughters were very concerned for her safety.
Detectives place her under arrest.
Hope didn't resist arrest at all. One of the other troopers was there and held her up, and we walked her out to the cruiser.
I found out Hope had been arrested for my father's murder from the newspaper online. I was in shock to find out in that way, but I wasn't really surprised.
Police and prosecutors put in overtime preparing the court case against Hope.
The bloody clothes in her house, she had thrown some in the washer. That made her look guilty.
But with a trial date looming, detectives know that there are no sure things in court.
The notion of this kind of old, thin woman beating her husband to death seemed a little strange.
Coming up, gruesome details of a nightmarish crime.
It was pretty clear to me that she planned this for quite some time.
And a new suspect turns Hope's trial upside down.
The defense received a letter from a person saying that they were the ones that committed the crime.
Hope Schreiner stands trial for the murder of her husband of 42 years, Bob.
It's titillating in a way. People want to know why it happened, what happened, how did this 70-year-old woman kill her husband? It was a very big case.
The prosecution contends that after almost a half-century together, Hope lost it.
The prosecution felt that because of the years of taking care of Bob Schreiner, that she did in fact just snap.
Her plan had been for him to take the coffee with the sleeping pills and fall asleep and be dead by the time she came back.
And it was pretty clear to me that she planned this for quite some time. If she's going to poison him with sleeping pills, that's not something you just do at the last minute. If she had succeeded in killing him with the sleeping pills, we would never have known that he didn't die of natural causes. She would have gotten away with it.
but he hadn't died. She got home. He was still alive.
To do away with my spouse ahead of time. I wouldn't do it in the middle of the day and in the driveway at my own house.
Hope struck over and over, even after clubbing Bob to the ground.
It must have been a very brutal way to go.
She did this in a fit of rage, not thinking clearly, and then she probably realized what she had done, how terrible it was.
When the prosecution rests, Hope's defense attorney focuses on her alibi.
The timing was part of the defense's argument that she could not have committed the crime.
If the time of death was noon, she wasn't there, and we could prove it, and we were prepared to do that. But on the stand, the medical examiner changed the time of death to be more in the afternoon.
He was probably killed around the 12:30 mark, but then again, it was a hot day, and so those parameters are very general.
She probably was home 45 minutes or an hour before the 911 call.
So from about 12:30 to 20 minutes to 2, she really can't account for what she was doing.
If Ms. Schreiner actually had gone out for a walk with the dogs, it seems unlikely that they would have not found Mr. Schreiner dead in the driveway, because those dogs would have gone directly to Mr. Schreiner.
Then, in a move that stuns everyone, the defense submits a letter into evidence that raises a new theory about who committed the crime.
Towards the end of the trial, the defense received a letter.
The letter was from somebody who was in Department of Corrections custody, indicating he thought he knew something about the killing.
We know someone who was probably involved with the murder of Bob Schreiner because of a prior business dealing with Mr. Schreiner.
This inmate in New Hampshire, he said that Bob Schreiner had sold this car to this guy, and this guy wasn't happy about it.
The letter saying something about a dispute potentially between Mr. Schreiner and somebody who was supposed to be violent.
The defense presented that as an alternative theory as to who might have committed the crime.
Was Bob actually killed over a car sale gone wrong? The prosecution isn't buying it.
The person that wrote this turned out to be someone who is very uncredible. He has made false allegations in the past.
The defense had time that was provided by the court to look into that issue, and ultimately no evidence was developed to show an alternate perpetrator.
On March 23, 2006, the decision goes to the jury.
The jury deliberated for about a day and a half. They came back with a not guilty on the first-degree murder charge, but guilty on the second-degree murder charge. I believe that is because she did try to kill him via sleeping pills, but when that didn't work, that she did just snap and she lost it and then killed him in a fit of rage.
It was distressing to me because they found her guilty of second degree rather than first degree murder. I can understand the jury might think, well, how strong is the evidence that she put the sleeping pills in his coffee and attempted to kill him that way? So they had to find second degree for the bludgeoning part of the killing.
Ms. Schreiner ultimately was sentenced to 17 years to life to serve.
At the end of the day, once all the evidence and the testimony was taken, it did narrow it right down to Hope Schreiner as the one who killed her husband, Bob.
Hope's sentence stipulates that she won't be eligible for parole until 2023, at the age of 90.
Hope Schreiner never admitted any guilt at all.
It's a tragic final act for two people struggling through a hard marriage.
It was really just very sad. He was dead and she was going to jail. These were two elderly people, and any reasonable member of the community, and myself included, would have way preferred that another way could have been found.
I still regret what happened to my father and miss him. My dad will be remembered as a kind man that had a hard life. He really loved his outdoor gardening and going for walks with his dogs and things like that. He's buried in a beautiful place overlooking the West River.
On a quiet summer night in July 2007, the peaceful town of Cheshire, Connecticut, became the scene of one of the most horrific crimes in American history. What began as a chance encounter at a supermarket would escalate into a 7-hour nightmare that claimed 3 innocent lives and exposed devastating failures in the criminal justice system. This is the story of the Petit family, a story of unimaginable terror, survival, and a community forever changed. But it's also a story that forces us to confront difficult questions about repeat offenders' parole systems and whether justice was truly served. The Petit family represented the American dream. Dr. William Petit Jr. was a respected endocrinologist who had practiced in Plainville, Connecticut since 1989. Born on September 24, 1956 in Southampton, Connecticut, William grew up in a family deeply involved in their community. His father ran a general store and served on the school board and town council. After graduating from Dartmouth College, William attended the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, where his life would change forever. In 1985, while working as a third-year medical student at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, he met Jennifer Hawk, a new oncology nurse at the same hospital. Their connection was immediate, and they married on April 13, 1985, in Meeville, Pennsylvania. Jennifer, born September 26, 1958 in Morristown, New Jersey, brought warmth and dedication to everything she did. She became the co-director of the health center at Cheshire Academy, a private boarding school where she was beloved by students and staff. Despite being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Jennifer never let her condition define her. Instead, she turned it into a cause that would inspire her entire family. The Patits had 2 daughters who were the pride of their lives. Haley Elizabeth, born October 15, 1989, was 17 years old in the summer of 2007. She had just graduated from the prestigious Miss Porter School in Farmington, where she excelled in everything she touched. Haley ran varsity cross country, played basketball and crew, maintained a spot on the high honor roll, and was elected Athletic Association head, a senior leadership position. She had been accepted to Dartmouth College, her father's alma mater, where she planned to study medicine and continue the family legacy of service. But Haley's greatest passion was fighting multiple sclerosis in honor of her mother. She captained a Walk MS team called Haley's Hope and won a school award for exceptional community service. Her dedication to this cause would become part of her lasting legacy. 11-year-old Michaela Rose Petit, born November 17, 1995, was the family's creative spirit. She attended Chase Collegiate School in Waterbury and loved cooking, often preparing elaborate meals for her family. On July 22, 2007, she went shopping with her mother to buy ingredients for a special dinner she planned to cook that evening. Michaela had already decided that when Haley left for college, she would take over the MS fundraising team and rename it Michaela's Miracle. The Petites were deeply embedded in their community. Their home on Sorghum Mill Road in Cheshire was a place of warmth, achievement, and hope. They had built a life that many would envy: successful careers, bright children, and a strong commitment to making the world better. But unknown to them, they had been noticed by 2 men who would destroy everything they had built. Joshua Komisarjevsky was 26 years old in 2007 with a history of burglary convictions and illicit narcotics use. Born on August 10, 1980, he had been adopted by Ben and Jude Komisarjevsky into a family with deep ties to the arts. His grandfather was the renowned theater director Theodore Komisarjevsky. But Joshua's life had taken a dark turn. He had spent years in and out of the criminal justice system, and by July 2007, he was on parole. Stephen Hayes, 44 years old, had an even longer criminal record dating back to a burglary conviction in 1981 when he was still a teenager. Born on May 30, 1963, Hayes had spent much of his adult life cycling through the prison system. Court documents would later reveal a disturbing pattern of cruelty that began in childhood, including severe abuse toward his younger brother. The two men had met through a halfway house illicit narcotics rehabilitation program. Both were supposed to be under supervision, monitored by the parole system designed to protect the public. But on July 22, 2007, they were free to walk the streets of Cheshire, planning their next crime. Sunday evening, July 22, 2007, seemed like any other summer day. Jennifer Petit took 11-year-old Michaela to a local supermarket. Michaela was excited about the special dinner she planned to cook for her family. As they shopped for ingredients, they had no idea they were being watched. Joshua Komisarjevsky spotted them in the store. Later testimony and trial evidence would reveal that he followed Jennifer and Michaela from the supermarket back to their home on Sorghum Mill Road. He observed the family, their routine, their beautiful home. He saw opportunity. He saw targets. That evening, Komisarjevsky contacted Stephen Hayes. At 7:45 p.m., Hayes sent a chilling text message, "I'm chomping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon." Over the next hour and a half, between 8:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m., the two men exchanged texts that prosecutors would later use as evidence of premeditation. They were joking, planning, anticipating what they were about to do. Police later reported that the pair may have even gone shopping for implements, an air rifle, and rope after seeing the girls at the supermarket. They were methodically preparing for a home invasion. The Petit family went to sleep that night with no idea that two violent criminals had marked them for destruction. The exact timing of the initial entry remains somewhat disputed in official records. A Connecticut Supreme Court summary places the entry at around 2:00 a.m. on Monday, July 23rd. Other police reports and contemporaneous news coverage describe the break-in as occurring shortly after 3 a.m. What is clear is that Hayes and Komisarjevsky entered the Petit home in the early morning darkness. Dr. William Petit was sleeping on a couch on the first floor, having dozed off after watching television. He was suddenly awakened by a devastating blow to his head with a baseball bat they had found in the home. The attack was brutal and immediate. William was dragged to the basement, disoriented and bleeding. The intruders bound him with rope and pillowcases, ensuring he couldn't escape or call for help. They beat him repeatedly. Later medical evidence would document severe injuries, head trauma, facial fractures, and extensive bruising. But somehow, William remained conscious, trapped in his own basement while the nightmare unfolded upstairs. Jennifer and the two girls were herded into their bedrooms and tied to their beds. The intruders told them this was just a robbery, that if everyone cooperated, no one would be hurt. It was a lie that would be repeated throughout the ordeal. A cruel psychological tactic to maintain control while they methodically planned something far more sinister. For approximately 6 to 7 hours, the Petit family endured unimaginable terror. The intruders ransacked the house, searching for valuables, credit cards, bank information. They demanded to know where money was kept, what accounts the family had access to. All the while, they kept the family separated, bound, and terrified. At some point during this period, Stephen Hayes left the house and went to a nearby gas station. Surveillance systems captured him purchasing $1.00 worth of gasoline in containers taken from the Petit garage. This wasn't for a getaway vehicle. It was for something far more horrific. As morning broke on July 23rd, the situation escalated into its most critical phase. The intruders had decided to force Jennifer to go to the bank and withdraw money. It was around 9 a.m. when Stephen Hayes drove Jennifer to the Bank of America on Mapleroft Plaza in Cheshire, holding her hostage in her own vehicle. Jennifer knew she was in grave danger. She knew her family was being held in the home, but she also saw an opportunity to get help. When she entered the bank, she managed to communicate to bank personnel that something was desperately wrong. The bank manager immediately recognized the danger Jennifer was in. At 9:21 a.m., while Jennifer was still at or near the teller window, the bank manager called 911. He tracked Jennifer's movements in real time, updating the dispatcher as she completed the forced withdrawal. At 9:25 a.m., the dispatcher relayed critical details to a supervising officer. 1 minute later, at 9:26 a.m., a broadcast went out to all Cheshire police units with vehicle information and the license plate number. The wheels of law enforcement were now in motion. Police were dispatched toward both the bank area and the Petite residence. But for the family trapped inside the house, time was running out. When Hayes returned to the house with Jennifer and the withdrawn money, the situation inside had already deteriorated beyond imagination. While Hayes had been at the bank, Komisarjevsky had assaulted Michaela. He had taken explicit photographs with his cell phone, evidence that would later be crucial in proving the depraved nature of these crimes. Jennifer was also assaulted. The medical examiner would later confirm that both mother and youngest daughter had been victimized in the most horrific ways possible. The intruders had never intended to simply rob the family and leave. They had planned something far more permanent. The men knew police were likely coming. The bank manager's call had started a countdown they couldn't stop. Rather than flee and abandon their victims alive, Hayes and Komisarjevsky made a decision that would seal their fate as two of the most hated criminals in Connecticut history. They doused the house with the gasoline Hayes had purchased. They poured it around the beds where Haley and Michaela lay tied and helpless. Then they set the house on fire. Jennifer Hawk Petite, 48 years old, didn't die in the flames. She was strangled to death, a final act of violence before the fire could consume her. Her daughters, 17-year-old Haley and 11-year-old Michaela, died from smoke inhalation as the flames spread rapidly through the home. They were conscious when the fire started. They knew they were going to die. In the basement, Dr. William Petite was still bound but conscious. The smell of smoke filtered down to him. He could hear the sounds above. Summoning strength he didn't know he had despite his severe injuries, William managed to free himself from his restraints. He crawled to a basement window, kicked it open, and escaped to a neighbor's yard. He collapsed on their porch, bloody and barely conscious, but alive. Cheshire police arrived at the Petite residence to a scene of chaos. The house was visibly burning. Just as they arrived, they saw two men exit the house and get into a vehicle in the driveway. These were Hayes and Komisarjevsky attempting to flee the scene of their crimes. What happened next unfolded in seconds. The suspects started the vehicle and began to back out. Police moved to block their exit. Rather than surrender, the suspects rammed their vehicle into multiple police cruisers, trying desperately to escape, but the collisions disabled their vehicle. They were trapped. At gunpoint, both Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky were taken into custody. They were arrested at the scene while firefighters rushed to battle the blaze consuming the Petite home. When firefighters finally suppressed the fire and could safely enter, they discovered what everyone had feared. 3 bodies were found inside. Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela had all perished. The only survivor was Dr. William Petite, who had been transported to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Multiple scenes had to be secured. The bank where Jennifer had made her desperate silent plea for help, the burning home where 3 women had died, and the collision site where the suspects had been arrested. The Cheshire Police Department, Connecticut State Police, Central District Major Crime Squad, and the State Fire Marshal's Office all responded to what had become one of the most heinous crimes in Connecticut history. The investigation that followed built an overwhelming case against both perpetrators. Text messages between Hayes and Komisarjevsky from the night before the crime showed clear premeditation. Their joking anticipatory messages about getting started demolished any defense that this had been a burglary that spontaneously escalated. The cell phone belonging to Joshua Komisarjevsky contained photographs that were almost too disturbing to describe. Digital images showed the victims bound and included explicit photos of the assault of Michaela. Technology expert John Farnham testified about these images at trial, and they became crucial evidence linking Komisarjevsky directly to the assault charges. Bank surveillance systems showed Hayes with Jennifer during the forced withdrawal. Gas station surveillance systems showed Hayes purchasing the gasoline shortly before the arson. The timeline was airtight. Medical examiner Wayne Carver provided testimony about the causes of death. Jennifer had been strangled. Haley and Michaela had died from smoke inhalation. Their bodies found in their burned beds where they had been tied. The physical evidence from the fire scene showed ropes, restraints, and the accelerant patterns that proved arson. Perhaps most damning, laboratory officials testified that blood samples showed neither Hayes nor Komisarjevsky had alcohol or illegal substances in their systems. There was no intoxication defense. They had been completely aware of their actions. On Tuesday, July 24, 2007, just one day after the murders, both suspects were arraigned in Meriden Superior Court. The state announced charges including kidnapping, burglary, arson, robbery, larceny, and assault. Each was held on $1.5 million bond. By Thursday, July 26, 2007, prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. Both men were formally charged with 6 capital felony counts, charges that made them eligible for execution under Connecticut law at the time. Stephen Hayes went to trial first. His trial began on September 13, 2010, more than 3 years after the crime. On October 5, 2010, the jury found him guilty on all counts. On November 8, 2010, the jury recommended the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Judge John Blue formally sentenced Hayes to death. Joshua Komisarjevsky's trial began on September 19, 2011. On September 22nd, jurors heard his recorded confession. On September 28th, they saw the text messages and heard medical examiner testimony about evidence of Michaela's assault. His defense team presented evidence of the abuse Komisarjevsky had suffered, hoping for mitigation in sentencing. The jury was unmoved. Komisarjevsky was also found guilty and sentenced to death. Both men would sit on Connecticut's death row, their appeals dragging through the courts while Dr. William Petit tried to rebuild a shattered life. The Petit murders became a watershed moment for Connecticut. On July 28, 2007, just 5 days after the murders, thousands attended a memorial service where Dr. William Petit eulogized his family. A community gathered at Central Connecticut State University to mourn 3 lives taken too soon. In the months that followed, the outpouring of support was extraordinary. On January 6, 2008, the Cheshire Lights of Hope event saw more than 130,000 luminaria candles lit in memory of Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela. The Petit Family Foundation was established to continue the charitable work, especially the MS advocacy that had meant so much to the family. Then came an unexpected turn. On April 25, 2012, Connecticut enacted legislation that prospectively repealed the death penalty for crimes committed on or after that date. The new law didn't affect Hayes and Komisarjevsky, whose crimes had occurred in 2007. They remained on death row. But in 2015, the Connecticut Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in a case called State v. Santiago. The court held that executing prisoners for crimes committed before the 2012 repeal would constitute cruel and unusual punishment under the Connecticut State Constitution. All death sentences were to be converted to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. In June 2016, Stephen Hayes was sentenced by Judge John Blue to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of release, plus an additional 106 years on related charges. Judge Blue's words at resentencing were final and absolute. With the gravity of these crimes and the depravity of your character, nothing more needs to be said. On July 26, 2016, Joshua Komisarjevsky received the same sentence, 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of release. Both men will die in prison. There will be no parole hearings, no chances for release, no possibility of freedom. The Cheshire home invasion stands as one of the most brutal crimes in American history. It exposed failures in the parole system, sparked debates about the death penalty, and left a community forever scarred. But perhaps more importantly, it showed us the preciousness of life and the devastating consequences when evil goes unchecked. Dr. William Petit survived physically, but he lost everything that mattered most. In the years following the tragedy, he has shown remarkable resilience. He has since remarried and had children, working tirelessly to honor his first family's memory through continued charitable work. The Petit Family Foundation continues to support causes that were dear to Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela, particularly in the areas of education and multiple sclerosis research. William has become a powerful advocate for victims' rights and criminal justice reform. He has testified before legislative committees, spoken at conferences, and worked with lawmakers to strengthen parole supervision and improve the criminal justice system's ability to protect the public. His advocacy helped shape Connecticut's response to violent crime, including stricter parole guidelines and enhanced monitoring of repeat offenders. The parole board faced intense scrutiny. Questions arose about risk assessment, supervision protocols, and whether warning signs had been missed or ignored. The case became a catalyst for reform, with new legislation passed to tighten parole requirements, increase supervision of high-risk offenders, and provide better training for parole officers in identifying dangerous behavior patterns. The death penalty debate that followed the Connecticut Supreme Court's 2015 ruling was equally contentious. Many victims' rights advocates, including Dr. Petit himself, believed that Hayes and Komisarjevsky deserved execution. They argued that the brutality of the crimes warranted the ultimate punishment and that converting their death sentences to life imprisonment represented a failure of justice. Others saw the Connecticut Supreme Court's decision as a principled stand against capital punishment, regardless of the heinousness of the crime. The court reasoned that once Connecticut had decided the death penalty was wrong going forward, it would be inconsistent and cruel to continue executing prisoners for older crimes. The debate continues to this day, with the Petit case serving as the primary example used by both sides. Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela Petit were extraordinary people whose lives were stolen by 2 men who chose violence, cruelty, and murder. Jennifer was more than a nurse and a mother. She was a caregiver who touched countless lives at Cheshire Academy. Students remembered her kindness, her dedication, and her ability to make everyone feel cared for, even as she battled her own illness. Haley was on the cusp of greatness. Her acceptance to Dartmouth, her athletic achievements, her leadership roles, all pointed to a young woman who would have made significant contributions to society. Her dedication to MS fundraising showed a maturity and compassion beyond her years. The world lost not just a bright student, but a future leader in medicine and advocacy. Michaela, at just 11 years old, had already shown the creativity and warmth that would have defined her life. Her love of cooking, her eagerness to take over her sister's fundraising work, her excitement about starting middle school. These were the dreams of a child whose future was limitless. That future was stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. They deserved to grow old, to achieve their dreams, to make their mark on the world. Instead, they became symbols, reminders that evil exists, that vigilance matters, and that justice, though sometimes imperfect, must always strive to protect the innocent. The Cheshire home invasion is not merely a local tragedy. It is a stark, brutal testament to the perennial failures of civilization when it loses its grip on the forces of barbarism. What we witness here is a classic pattern of societal decay, where the mechanisms designed to protect the innocent, the law, the justice system, the very fabric of community, are demonstrably undermined by a combination of elite dereliction and the unyielding persistence of human depravity. The events unfold with a chilling predictability, a grim narrative that is echoed through history from the sacking of cities in antiquity to the modern-day breakdown of order in our own streets. The Petit family, a paradigm of the American aspirations, successful, civic-minded, educated, devoted to family and community, became targets precisely because they represented the order and prosperity that predators despise and seek to consume. This is not a random act of violence in the chaotic sense. It is a calculated assault by two men, Komisarjevsky and Hayes, who were not only known to the system but had been processed, rehabilitated, and then released back into society, despite clear patterns of violent criminality and a demonstrable inability to conform to societal norms. Their prior records, their illicit narcotics use, their very presence in a halfway house. These were not minor infractions but flashing red lights, ignored by a system that prioritizes abstract notions of rehabilitation over the concrete imperative of public safety. This is a recurring theme throughout history, the failure of the guardians of the polis to identify and contain threats, often due to a misguided idealism or a bureaucratic inertia that paralyzes effective action. Think of the Roman Republic in its later stages, where the rule of law became increasingly tenuous, and powerful individuals or criminal gangs could operate with impunity, undermining the trust that held the vast empire together. The parole system designed to protect the public failed utterly, not because it was inherently flawed in concept, but because its execution was compromised. It allowed two men who had proven themselves incapable of self-governance and respect for others to roam free. This is a failure of vigilance, a dereliction of the most basic duty of the state, to protect its citizens from internal enemies. The text messages exchanged between Hayes and Komisarjevsky are not just evidence. They are a window into the minds of men utterly devoid of empathy, planning their heinous acts with a casualness that speaks to a profound moral abyss. I'm chomping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon. This is the language of men for whom human life is merely an object, a means to an end, a source of perverse pleasure or material gain. Such callousness is not new. It is the hallmark of the barbarian throughout history, whether the Viking raider, the Mongol horde, or the street gang. What distinguishes the modern context is that these barbarians are not at the gates. They are within, nurtured by a system that often seems more concerned with their rights than with the rights of their victims to safety and life itself. The methodical preparation, the purchase of an air rifle and rope, the surveillance of the family, the prolonged terrorization within the home, demonstrates a chilling premeditation that belies any notion of a crime of passion or a spontaneous escalation. This was a planned act of conquest, a calculated invasion of a domestic sanctuary, a violation of the most fundamental social contract. The home, historically the last refuge, the sacred space of family, was transformed into a torture chamber. This is a direct assault on the very foundations of a stable society. When the sanctity of the home can be so easily breached, when the state cannot guarantee safety within one's own walls, then the entire edifice of civil order begins to crumble. The actions of Jennifer Petit at the bank, her desperate, silent plea for help, highlight the courage of the individual against overwhelming evil, but also the agonizing slowness of the system. The 911 call, the dispatch of police, these are the mechanisms of a modern state, but they often operate with a bureaucratic lag that is fatal in moments of crisis. The police response, while ultimately successful in apprehending the perpetrators, was too late for Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela. This gap between the initiation of a response and its effective arrival is a critical vulnerability that predators exploit. The decision by Hayes and Komisarjevsky to douse the house with gasoline and set it ablaze after the assaults and the forced withdrawal reveals a level of depravity that transcends mere criminality. This was an act of annihilation, a deliberate attempt to erase all evidence and all witnesses, a final sadistic flourish designed to maximize suffering and destruction. It is the signature of pure, unadulterated evil, a force that has manifested in various forms throughout human history. From the massacres ordered by despots to the systematic extermination campaigns of totalitarian regimes. The subsequent debate over the death penalty and its eventual repeal in Connecticut further exposes the deep ideological fissures within modern Western societies. On one side are those, like Dr. William Petit, who rightly demand ultimate justice for ultimate crimes, recognizing that some acts are so heinous they forfeit the perpetrator's right to continued existence. This perspective aligns with ancient principles of retributive justice, found in codes like Hammurabi's, or in the Roman concept of lex talionis, where the punishment must fit the crime, and the community's moral order must be reaffirmed through decisive action. On the other side are those who, often driven by a philosophical aversion to state-sanctioned killing, or a concern for the cruel and unusual nature of capital punishment, argue for its abolition, even for the most monstrous offenders. This position, while seemingly enlightened, often inadvertently elevates the concerns of the criminal over the suffering of the victim and the moral outrage of the community. It reflects a modern tendency to deconstruct traditional notions of justice, to replace clarity with ambiguity, and to prioritize abstract legalistic principles over the raw, visceral demand for accountability. The Connecticut Supreme Court's ruling converting death sentences to life imprisonment is a prime example of this intellectual and moral equivocation. It suggests that the cruelty of execution outweighs the cruelty of the crimes themselves, a dangerous inversion of moral priorities that sends a confused message to both criminals and law-abiding citizens. This is a pattern seen in civilizations that have become too comfortable, too detached from the brutal realities of human nature, too prone to intellectualizing evil rather than confronting it directly. The Roman Empire, in its decline, became increasingly bureaucratic and legalistic, often losing the practical efficacy that had once made it so formidable. The Petit murders, therefore, serve as a chilling case study in the consequences of systemic weakness, moral relativism, and the enduring presence of evil. It is a reminder that the veneer of civilization is thin, and that eternal vigilance, robust institutions, and an unwavering commitment to justice are not luxuries but existential necessities. The failure to address repeat offenders with the severity they warrant, the intellectual gymnastics surrounding capital punishment, and the bureaucratic delays in law enforcement response all contribute to an environment where such atrocities can not only occur, but can become catalysts for further societal erosion. The story of the Petit family is a microcosm of the larger struggle between order and chaos, between good and evil, a struggle that every society must constantly wage, or risk succumbing to the darkness within. The Cheshire home invasion, a crime of unspeakable horror, lays bare fundamental vulnerabilities within our modern system, revealing a civilization that often struggles to defend its most basic principles against the relentless tide of depravity. What this case reveals about the health of the current system is a profound and unsettling truth that the mechanisms designed to protect us are often compromised by a combination of bureaucratic inefficiency, ideological confusion, and a dangerous reluctance to confront evil with the necessary resolve. The parole system, intended as a safeguard, became instead a conduit for danger, releasing proven predators back into the community with insufficient oversight. This is not merely a technical failure. It is a moral one, stemming from a pervasive societal tendency to prioritize abstract notions of rehabilitation over the concrete safety of innocent citizens. When the state fails to secure its citizens from known threats, it erodes the very foundation of social trust, breeding cynicism and fear. The public loses faith in the institutions meant to serve them, and this loss of faith is a corrosive acid, dissolving the bonds that hold a society together. The likely short-term consequences of such failures are a heightened sense of insecurity, a demand for stricter measures, and a reactive rather than proactive approach to crime. We see this in the legislative reforms that followed the Petit case, which, while necessary, were enacted only after 3 lives were brutally extinguished. This reactive posture is a hallmark of a system that has become complacent, waiting for catastrophe before taking decisive action. The long-term consequences are far more dire: a gradual desensitization to violence, a normalization of fear, and a creeping suspicion that justice is not truly blind, but rather swayed by shifting intellectual fashions or political expediency. When the ultimate punishment for the most heinous crimes is debated, diluted, or ultimately abandoned, it sends a clear message to those who would commit such acts that the consequences, however severe, will not be absolute. This weakens deterrence, not just for the individual criminal, but for the entire criminal class, who perceive a softening of resolve. The institutions themselves, the courts, the parole boards, the legislative bodies, are diminished in their authority and moral standing when they appear to equivocate on matters of fundamental justice. Social trust, the invisible glue that binds a community, is shattered when families like the Petites, who embodied the very best of civic life, are offered up as sacrifices to a system that prioritizes the comfort of the condemned over the sanctity of the innocent. The prophetic lesson from history is clear. Civilizations that lose their capacity for righteous indignation, that become overly sophisticated in their legalistic interpretations, and that shy away from the hard truths of human nature, inevitably invite chaos. The Roman Empire did not fall in a single day, but through a gradual erosion of civic virtue, a weakening of its institutions, and a loss of the will to defend its core values. The Petit tragedy serves as a stark reminder that deterrence is not merely a theory. It is a practical necessity. When the consequences for evil are swift, certain, and severe, it sends a powerful message. When they are muddled by endless appeals, philosophical debates, and retrospective legal reinterpretations, the message becomes one of weakness, an invitation for further transgression. The health of our system, therefore, is precarious. It is a system that, in its striving for what it perceives as enlightened progress, risks forgetting the primal, immutable truths of justice and retribution. If these patterns do not change, if we continue to prioritize abstract ideals over concrete protection, if we fail to hold accountable those who betray the public trust, then we risk a future where the exceptional horror of the Cheshire Home invasion becomes not an anomaly, but a chilling harbinger of a world where order is fleeting, and barbarism lies just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to strike. The legacy of Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela Petit demands not just remembrance, but a renewed, unwavering commitment to a justice system that truly protects the innocent and punishes the guilty with an unyielding hand.